on the cloud. So I'd like to welcome everyone to a Straw Dog Writers Guild Craft Workshop. Let me first briefly mention a couple of upcoming events. On Thursday, June 20th, the Straw Dog Writers Guild and the Longmeadow Adult Center will present a writer's night with Linda Bratcher-Lodka. Linda's the Massachusetts Beat Poet Laureate. And on Monday, June 24th, the Straw Dog Writers Guild in the Belding Memorial Library Meeting Room will offer a Midsummer Night's Dream, Love, and Poetry Share. And so those are upcoming events you might want to consider. Every Wednesday, of course, I invite you to join us for Straw Dog Writes, which is a 2-hour writing session via Zoom, which is hosted by me. And without further ado, let's begin today's workshop, Promoting Your Work as an Indie Author by J. Scott Coatsworth. I met Scott last year when I was at Baycon, and I can tell you, you're in for a real treat. Scott lives with his husband, Mark, in a yellow bungalow in Sacramento. He was indoctrinated into fantasy and sci-fi by his mother at the tender age of 9. He devoured her library, but as he grew up, he wondered where all the people like him were. He decided that if there weren't queer characters in his favorite genres, he would remake them to his own ends. A Rainbow Award-winning author, he runs Queer Sci Fi, QueeRomance Ink, Liminal Fiction, and Other Worlds Inc. with Mark, sites that celebrate fiction reflecting queer reality. And he is the committee chair for the Indie Authors Committee at the Science Fiction and Fantasy Writers Association. And so without further ado, let me introduce Scott Coatsworth.
Great. Thank you. And actually, a little correction, I haven't changed it yet on the site. I just stepped down from the Indie Author Committee. I'm still in touch with them, but yeah, I did that for 2 years, actually 3, I think. So I am here. I brought one of my latest books, Suck a Little Happy Juice. This is my writing book for indie authors. And a lot of the stuff that I'm going to be going over today comes from that book. It started out as a series of blog posts that I wrote on my blog. I would go into authory things and also stuff for readers, but about 1.5 years ago, I pulled all the author stuff out and decided to put it together in a book. I've been doing self-publishing now for about 7 years. I was with Dream Spinner and with a couple other publishers, traditional publishers, and ended up going out on my own. I want to start with a quote from the book. It's from a dear friend of mine. I don't know if any of you knew Jamie Lee Moyer. Jamie Lee passed away unexpectedly a few months ago, but had helped me beta read the book and gave me this incredible quote. "The truth is, publishing will break your heart, but you can't let that stop you. You need to be tough, really tough, or take your scribbles and go home. Becoming a writer isn't a stroll through the park with bluebirds singing and cute animals running by your side. It's the freaking Thunderdome. Bring armor." That really spoke to me. I've been in the publishing game now since 2014 when I got my first story published. And I thought that I was going to get with a publisher. It was a mid-sized publisher. They were going to publish my book. I fully expected them to sell 1,000 or 2,000 copies in the first week of my title. And I think I ended up selling like 150, which was pretty good, but to me was absolutely dismal. So it's been a long haul trying to figure out this whole kind of publishing game and what success means to me. I first started writing when I was in elementary school. I wrote this short story for a contest at the University of Arizona that was based on the Jetsons. I hand illustrated it with crayon, and I did actually win. And for all I know, there may be a copy of this still somewhere in the university library. I haven't gone to check. I didn't really get serious at it until 2014, although I had a few attempts. I wrote a novel in the 90s, sent it out to 10 big publishers, and one by one they came back and rejected it. And by the end, almost 1 year to the date, the last one turned me down. And I just stopped writing for a long time because it just felt like I was never going to get anywhere. In 2013, I had started writing, and I was kind of getting going again and getting my mojo. And then my husband Mark's mother passed away. And we basically stopped everything. We went down to spend the last week with her, and then there was a couple weeks after the funeral, getting everything ready and taken care of. And I remember turning to Mark and I said, I was just getting going in this writing thing again, and then this happened, and now I'm stopped. And I think it kind of pissed him off. He looked at me and he said, the only thing stopping you from writing is you. So if you want to write, write. And it was like a wake-up call. So I decided to kind of push ahead and get serious about it. I took the story that I'd written back in the 90s, which was a generation ship sci-fantasy, and decided to go back and figure out the origin of that ship and how it came about. And so I wrote the first novella, which eventually became the first of 3 parts in my book, This Dark Divide. I also was working on another story that I did in NaNoWriMo, which became Skythane. And so I got out there and got published with Dream Spinner and then with some other publishers. In 2020, I think it was right during the pandemic. You may or may not know about Dream Spinner, but they had a lot of trouble. They had an embezzlement, they had some problems with management and some other things. And they were looking like they might go out of business. They weren't paying their authors royalties. And they gave us the opportunity to leave, even if we were still in contract. And I went ahead and took it, partly because of what they were going through. And I was worried that with a bankruptcy, even though the contract says the rights would come back to me, a bankruptcy judge could basically annul that and say, it's going to be stuck in this rights situation for 2 or 3 years. But also because I had really wanted to kind of shift away from a romance focus to more of a sci-fi fantasy with diverse characters focus. And I decided to do my own self-publishing. So I went ahead and one by one re-released all the things that they had done, along with the new things I'd done myself. I now have 12 novels out. The last one's coming out actually this month in paperback and then full release in September. I have 8 novellas and about 32 shorts that have been published. So I'm doing pretty well in terms of quantity of stuff. I sell a number of them every month. I don't make nearly enough to pay for much more than, see, if I went to Starbucks for coffee once a day, I could probably afford that on my royalties, maybe. But I do okay. One thing I've learned about being an author is there's a lot of ways you can define success. You can define it by how many copies of the books you sell. You can define it by how high up the list you go, whether it's Amazon lists or the New York Times. You can define it by how much money you make, which is one of my favorites, but again, not quite there yet. You can define it by awards you win or reviews you get. What it's ultimately come down to me, or for me, is does it make me happy? I found that when I'm writing, I'm happiest. And I want to clarify, often when I'm actually writing, I'm not happy at all because writing is hard. But when I am regularly writing, when I'm doing the writing work, I'm happiest as a person. So that's kind of the introduction about me, where I came from. A few things I've learned about promotion. First of all, nothing works for everyone. You may have a good friend of yours that says, I just did this great thing and I sold 10,000 copies and it worked really well. I had a book bub that I did when I was with Dream Spinner. And the great thing about that was they paid for it and I got most of the money. But I cleared about $4,200 on that book bub the first time. When I went on my own, I thought, I'm going to do this again. I'm going to do this on my own with a different book, and I'm going to make tons of money, and I can invest that into doing audio and into other books and all these things. And I put out about $800 into a book bub, and I made $600. And that's not 600 net, that's 600 gross. And so I did the same thing just myself, and it worked one time and it didn't work the other. So just because something doesn't work for you that someone else worked for, that doesn't mean that you failed. It just means that for some reason that thing didn't work for what you're doing. Also, nothing works forever. And this is one of the harder things I had to learn. Again, if something worked really well for you once, it should work well for you again and again and again. But things are constantly changing. Algorithms are changing. Just the way the world works is changing. There's a lot more competition now than there used to be in a lot of areas. So, again, maybe you're doing something with one website and it worked really well the one time, but now there's another website competing with that's pulled away some of the business. So you have to kind of constantly reinvent what you're doing in promotion. You can't really just stick with the one thing. I mean, by all means, write it for as long as it works, but be ready to kind of hop into something else. To me, the best promo are the things that you enjoy doing because you're going to put your heart and soul into them. And I'll go into a few of those things that I've tried and that have worked, or just kind of that I really like doing and maybe helped sell a few books. I'm not going to talk today about social media or ads. I have tried both. I know, again, people that have succeeded at both things very well. I do believe that social media's heyday is kind of over at this point. I think they've got it so tied down now. I used to post back in the day marriage equality stories for a site that we ran, Purple Unions, and I would do a daily rundown of all the stuff that was going on in marriage equality in the early 2000s and the early 2010s. And we used to have stories that I'd post that would go viral and they would get thousands and thousands of people looking at them. I have not had anything go viral more than like 300 or 400 people in the last 10 years. And most of those things have been personal things I've posted to Facebook about myself, nothing to do with book promo. So I won't say you can't make social media work. I've had, again, people do really well on it. People do well on TikTok. I just can't like imagine spending all the time doing video and, but to me, those and the Amazon and Facebook ads are now kind of soul-sucking, time-sucking vampires. And so while I will still participate in some of the social media stuff, I'm not going to try to make a ton of money there. One of the first things that I recommend before you start your promo, if you haven't done this already, is that you figure out a brand that will encapsulate who you are and what you write. Something that you can put out there. And when I say brand in this case, it's kind of a two-part thing. One is an actual set of keywords or an actual one-line statement about you. But the other thing is also kind of what you represent in general. I had a friend who I was encouraging to join one of our websites, and she hadn't signed up, and I met her at a conference, and she said, well, I thought you were being kind of pushy about the whole thing, but I didn't respond to you because my brand as the author is that I am kind and I am, basically just not the kind of person that puts out a lot of negative energy to the world. So as part of my brand, I figured it was better to just wait until I could talk to you one-on-one, even though this was never going to be something that was aired in public, but that was just the author's brand, how they had set themselves up. A few brand keywords or keyword phrases that folks I know have come up with. Vegetarian werewolves is one of my favorites. Authentic voices and unconventional heroes. My own is sci-fi and fantasy bent, referring to, queer sci-fi and fantasy. Amy Lane has one, Choose Your Lane to Love, which works really nicely with her author name. And nothing but happily ever afters. So I'll stop there and say, do any of you have a tagline that you use for your brand? Okay. I mean, it's not absolutely necessary, but it's just a nice something to put on your website. And also when you're everything you're communicating with your folks, if you have it in your title, in your emails, I see a lot of people use them in their Facebook headers. And again, it's just something that will quickly kind of give people an idea of who you are and what you write. Next thing, and I think you guys already have this pretty much covered, a writer's group. Back in 2015, I met with two of my writer friends here in Sacramento, Pat Henshaw and Christopher Kohler. We had lunch at Tower Cafe, and we were talking about the fact that Sacramento did not have a local queer writers group. And so we decided to do something about it, and we started one. And then immediately Christopher left and didn't have time for it. And Pat hung on for a while, but then Pat has had a lot of just physical issues and can't participate in a lot of the same things unless it's on Zoom, like we talked about earlier here. But the group still continued. I've become the kind of guru of it. It now has about 140 members, of which I would say about 20 are active regularly. But the others we kind of tap into and they come in periodically. We have now started doing local events. We do queer pride events. We do Lavender Library, our local queer library readings 4 times a year. I just tapped a person to volunteer for bookstore readings. And so she set up 4 of them so far and setting up some more now. And we do every other month get together at a local cafe and we kind of just hang out and chat. We do mentoring for new writers. So it's become a really big thing that has also helped me to sell books. We did this last year, I think about $5,500. No, sorry, this year, $5,500 so far at 5 events total. And the last one at Sacramento Pride, we had done $1,700, $1,800 last year. We did $3,100 in sales this year. So it's been a way to really help us each individually increase our sales and do promo. And the great thing about it is that the organization overall takes care of all the stuff, and basically I do it, but takes care of all of like the taxes and the licensing and everything else. And then everybody just shows up and sells each other's books. We've got a great kind of camaraderie together. Just we work really well as like a well-oiled machine. We'll be talking to someone about a book and they'll say, oh yeah, I like this one. It's like, okay, Greta, get up here. That's your book. And she starts talking to them. She makes the sale as she's going over to sign the book. Somebody takes the book from her, goes to the register thing on the iPad, does the actual payment thing. And so we just kind of each work together like that. We also learn whatever everybody else has at the table. And so, the first question is always, what do you like to read? And then whatever they say, we try to direct them to the appropriate thing on the table and grab the right person out of the back and shove them up front to talk to them. So I don't know if you guys have done any actual shows with your group, but I found it's a great way to sell books. You also get a much better margin than you would if you tried to sell books through somebody else, whether it's through Amazon or a publisher. It does help if you are an indie author here because you can get the books a lot cheaper. I get them for probably $3 to $5 per book, shipping inclusive for most of my books. My friend Marvin pays anywhere between $8 and $13 to his publisher to get the same books. And so I can actually price them a little bit lower and still make the same amount of money than he does if he has to price them at like 20 bucks into my 15. Some things to look for here are farmers markets. We just recently had the Sacramento Book Festival, the first Sacramento Book Festival, and they actually did it as an add-on to one of the local farmers markets here. So they bought about 10 or 12 booths, and the authors all came individually, and then everybody advertised to their folks. And for being a small market and being the first time we'd ever done this, I still sold 16 books in 4 hours. So it wasn't something that's going to make my financial day for the year. But again, it was a good way to kind of get started. You can look for pop-up markets. Craft fairs are a good place. We're also trying out Comic-Cons and anime cons this year. We did the Sacramento Comic-Con back in March and did pretty well. But the Anime Con here in Sacramento apparently has about 5 times as many people that come to Comic-Con. And it was prohibitively expensive. It was going to be $700, which for the 3 or 4 of us we can sit at the table is quite a lot. But because we were an LGBTQ group, the person that runs the Artist Alley came up to us and said, why didn't you apply as an artist? And we will look at you and probably approve you to come in. And that cut our cost to $250, which divided by 4 people is pretty reasonable. So that's the other thing I like about doing these kind of shared events. At many of them, especially the local prides, we can get the author cost down to 15 or 20 bucks a person. And so if they sell 2 or 3 books, they've made their money back. And there's also just such an outpouring of people that love to see the real authors. It's one of the things we advertise at our table, and we're going to get a big banner to go up on the top of our canopy next time that says local Queer Sacramento authors, as they'll be coming up and talking to you, and they think you're just a bookstore salesperson, and they're like, oh yeah, this is interesting. And they pick up a book, and I'm like, that's me. And they're like, oh, that's you? Oh my God, that's so exciting. And they just kind of light up, which as a byproduct also makes my day. Because I spend most of my time, as you guys do, at my desk in my writer cave, just trying to type away and come up with something I think somebody will like to read. And when you find someone that just is so excited to have you there, there's no reward to that goes beyond the sale that you might make for it. If you do, I don't know, like again, if you guys have you done this kind of thing, Stephen? Have you done group events where you actually go all sell together?
So Straw Dog Writers Guild is not. I mean, I've been doing a lot of this stuff with Water Dragon, but that's not that's one of the things I've been talking to Straw Dog about doing, is trying to organize a book fair for the Pioneer Valley. There used to be a big book fair in East Hampton, but it got killed off by the pandemic and has not yet gotten started. There is a writers group in Westfield that has been doing a number of events like this, and might be a model for something that could be used with other, more local groups,
Okay.
or perhaps Straw Dog as well.
Yeah, so definitely the book festival. One of the things we're trying to do here with ours, it's being put on by the California Writers Club Sacramento Guild or Sacramento branch. But next year they want to bring in all the other local writers groups to be involved in it. It's a big undertaking, and one group to try to run it can be very difficult. Of course, then you get a lot of groups, and then there's all the different voices you got to deal with. But I would see if you can do that, but also just look for some local events and do some tests. You mainly need an iPad and a way to pay, and you may already have that if you're an author that you're doing for yourself. You have to, at least in California, go to the California Department of Tax and Financial something, CDTFA. You basically have to get a local permit for it, which you then at the end of the year use to pay taxes to the state that the state then distributes to the various local municipalities as well. And then you may have to get a business license, but usually those are around 20 bucks here. Some cities do a license just for the event, and some give you a regular business license, but they're usually about the same cost. And it's well worth it, but it does take some setup, especially the first time. Like everything promo, don't feel like you have to do everything all at once. We keep adding things on as we go. We've been doing this for a number of years now. At one point we decided we needed a tablecloth, and then at another point we decided we needed a shelf to go on top of the table, and then we thought wouldn't it be great to put books in like bookstore order? And so we made tags for the genres and separated them out by genre so it could refer people to the various parts of the table. We decided at one point we needed a canopy because the rental fee in the canopy was going to be $250 and we could buy one for 150. So now we've got a canopy. So it's something that you can start out really simple. Just get a few authors involved, try it out, and then just kind of build on it bit by bit. It doesn't have to be an all at once, overwhelming, awful thing. Let's see. Next thing, try to get your book into local libraries and bookstores if you haven't already. This can be a challenge. Bookstores will go one of two ways. They may want to do consignment with you and have you bring books, which means you've got to track where your books are and check in with them periodically. Essentially, you just leave the books with them and then they sell them. They keep a tally and then they give you a check when you come in for any books sold. The good thing about that is there's not going to be a return involved like there is through a distributor, but you also have to provide the books and keep track of them. They may be also willing to order them if you're on Ingram Spark. And if you guys are you all familiar with Ingram Spark? Okay. So yeah, so it's basically your way to distribute through Ingram kind of on a one at a time basis. And they can order through Ingram and they will get a returnable book. But then you either have to deal with the book being returned if you've chosen to be full return with a full copy. I choose to have my books destroyed and returned, just taking the money off, because when they return the book to you, they're going to charge you the full return of the book, the shipping as well. So you can quickly run you into negative numbers. I hate the idea of my books just being destroyed. I kind of hope that maybe somebody just ripped the cover off and gave it to somebody, but yeah. But if you start building the relationships with your local bookstores and see what they're interested, if they will carry you. Some of them will also do it in connection with a reading. And this is where your local author group comes in, because you have a lot more power to get readings at bookstores if you're working with a group of authors you can bring in than with just yourself. A lot of bookstores, because they do put time and energy and shut down part of the store for it. If you're just a single author, they want some kind of evidence that you are actually going to move some books or make it worth their while. So if you're bringing a group of authors, they look at it and they say, well, you've got 8 authors. They're all going to be talking to their audience. There's a much better chance that I will get a full bookstore here and actually sell a few books. And by doing those readings periodically, you can also start to build those relationships with the owners and the buyers in the stores, and kind of slowly work up your profile as a local author, as a beloved local author. Libraries are a different animal. Libraries have very different requirements for each branch or each group of libraries, but a lot of them will want you to have at least one trade magazine review in like Publishers Weekly or Library Journal. You can buy one in Kirkus for about $400. I don't do that because I don't like buying reviews, but that's one way to get in with the libraries. You can also donate a copy and see if they will do that. Sacramento here has an actual local author's room at the main branch library. And so they will stock one copy of your books for a lot of authors here in that branch, and then make it available to distribute out to all the other places. The other way to get into your libraries is to let them know, especially if you're doing through draft to digital. There are a number of library services that distribute ebooks to libraries, like Overdraft and Hoopla, which takes forever. I think I just had one of my books I submitted through D2D back in 2021 that was accepted last week into Hoopla. So, I mean, yay. But yeah, so that's another way to get into libraries. And
Excuse me. In Western Mass, it's something called CW Mars, the Central Western Massachusetts Associate, and that's the ebook through the libraries.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. Okay. So the next thing is again back to the local readings. When you do a reading at a bookstore, most of them will want you to bring your own books. Again, unless you're Stephen King or some other big name author, they're not going to want to spend time ordering the books, paying for the shipping, having the books in stock. But they may be willing to, again, keep some in stock after the reading consignment. And again, you guys don't have a book festival yet. I was going to say a lot of book festivals do reading spots there, but always keep copies of your book with you to sell. Keep some in the back trunk of your car. You never know when somebody might be interested. I've got friends that do that and like talk about their books and like, oh, that sounds really interesting. I'd love to look at it. Well, I've got it right here, And so again, be ready to sell books wherever you go. the last part before we go to my final quote, and then we can do some Q&A. Think about ways you can promote your book that are outside of the ordinary. And I'll give you a few examples of things that I've done. So I have a book called River City Chronicles. That's that one there. And it was written as a blog serial. I don't know if any of you know Armistead Maupin and Tales of the City. He wrote that initially as the San Francisco Chronicle, as a once a week story in the Chronicle column. And when he was done, he published the whole thing as a book, and he did the second one the same way. I think the third one he did as an actual, just direct to a book. But I had done this, modeling it on that, and this is my kind of my love letter to Sacramento. So it's this magical realism story about this Italian restaurant and this cooking class that these two Italian guys start because they're desperate to keep the restaurant afloat. And one by one, these people are kind of drawn to it through this kind of very subtle magical means. And each one of the people has a secret. And by the end of the book, all the secrets start to come out. But it's very heavy on local stuff. So there's some stuff I made up. There's the Ragazzi restaurant, which means the boys or the guys, which is in an actual place here in Sacramento. And I can tell people where it is, but it's a coffee shop in reality. There's our Pete's Coffee, which in the story is the Everyday Grind, which again is in a very specific place in the what we call Lavender Heights, which is strangely a very, very flat district, but it's called Lavender Heights for some reason. I think because it was higher than the river level back in the day. And there's a lot of just real things and events. There's a play that I went to. There's feeding giraffes at the zoo, which you can do here. There's just a lot of things that will really tie into stuff that people know here. So it's a very local book. It's one I sell really well when I do local events. And I decided it would be cool to do a little bike tour for it. So my husband Mark and I got on our bikes, took a bunch of little postcards for the book. We went from cafe to cafe and found all the ones that had places to leave things or put up little cards on the Starbucks little board. And then we documented the whole thing on social media as we were going. You know, took pictures of ourselves and talked about it in videos and things. And it just became a really kind of fun day outing to promote the word about the book. I don't know if or how many copies it moved, but it was a way to kind of get the word out in sort of a guerrilla ground way. Similarly, we also have a lot of little libraries here in our neighborhood. I think within River Park, which is river over here, and then the railroad tracks over there, there are probably 12 or 14 little libraries. If you haven't seen these are the little basically box on a post, and they've got little glass fronts, and people do cute little houses and all different designs. And then people put books in there that anyone can just take and essentially check out. And then people just take the books and read them. So I had a book that I had gotten back from my first publisher and took some of the extra copies and signed them and just went around, and we did again a tour and kind of did it on Facebook, and a walking tour of the neighborhood on a couple different days and dropped books in all the little libraries in our area. So there's a lot of things like that you can do, just kind of fun stuff and things that I think for me, they also kind of feed me as an author, because I just feel like I'm connecting with my community in a way. I'm doing something different, something fun that you can try to do to get the word about your book out there. We can also do a blog tour, which is basically like a book tour, but you're essentially appearing on blogs, so you don't have to fly any place, which is ideal for folks that do everything online. My husband Mark and I have been running blog tours for a long time, specifically for the LGBTQ community. But the idea is simply that you contact a bunch of blogs that are relevant to your book, or have somebody do that for you. And you usually do it around your release date. And we try to do it for like a 7-day period, with the heaviest on the first day, but kind of get an extended promotion period. And then you provide them with information about your book, and some will review it, some will just post the information and put it out there. Again, like anything else, sometimes it does really well. Sometimes it just, helps get the word out a little bit better. But it's a great way to do a tour for your book without having to spend all the money and setting up the book tour and the signings and the flights and the hotels and everything else, which I don't think any of us can probably afford. If you can, more power to you. Last thing, try to find something that actually goes with your book's theme. Say your book's set in a coffee shop. Well, contact your local coffee shops and see if you can do some kind of event there, do a reading or something. Is your book set in like a music theme? Find music stores or something you can connect with. Try to find something that will go with your book, that you can actually go into a space you're not normally used to going into selling, to get word out about your book. Steve and I were talking about earlier before this meeting started about a big group meeting he had with 1,600 people, and he does these covers behind him. So people see them, and sometimes people that are just in those meetings will see the covers and will buy his book. So, look for things like that, audiences that you might not normally reach that would be a good fit for your book, and try to set something up there. So I know it's a lot I threw at you. That's what I've got for today. I'm going to close it out with one more quote, and then we can kind of open it up to questions, and I'll be happy to kind of tell you, what I think of whatever you want to ask me. This is from the end of the book. I don't claim to have all the answers. There's always more to learn, and things in the indie publishing world are constantly changing. What I can do is hold out a hand, help you find your own path, and give you a virtual hug when things go awry. Being an indie author is an ongoing journey, and there's always something new to learn. It'll take you to amazing places if it doesn't kill you first. Spoiler alert, it probably won't kill you. We're all in this together, and that's why I wrote the book. So that's it. Open it up to questions and see where it goes.
Great. Thank you very much, Scott. Does anybody have a question?
Don't hit me all at once.
I have a quick question, please. My name is Ariana, and I have a lot of shame over the fact that I really have been just terrible at promotion, and my book has been out for a while. I put out a memoir that actually, I mean, it brings me joy that people who have read it have really enjoyed it, and they go out of their way to tell me about it, and that just, it makes me really happy. But I just, for some reason, I just am very reclusive about putting myself out there, so I just want to know, do you see scenarios about people who just fell down on the job and now they're ready to promote? Because I know that's probably tougher.
Well, I'm going to start by saying that you shouldn't be ashamed at all. Everybody hates promotion. Everybody hates promotion. And okay, there are like 3 people that don't, but everybody hates promotion. We all just basically want to be writing. We want to be getting our word out there. And these publishers, even if you're with a traditional publisher, put more and more on authors to try to promote their stuff themselves, and done less and less. So do not be ashamed. You are doing what you can when you can do it. Even if you start to get back into promotion, you're not going to hit the ground running and suddenly be doing 8 hours of promotion a day and selling 100,000 books and everything. Do what feels good to you, and do what you can each day. Do a little bit each day. It's really hard anymore because books basically have like a 2-day shelf life. They hit the charts and then they go up if they are gonna, and then people buy them and then people forget about them, and then there's 4,000 other books the next day. So again, what I try to do is I try to find places that I can actually sell the book directly if I can. That's my first go-to. Beyond that, I try to kind of continually build my audience. One of my main things, and even that is not as productive as it used to be, but one of my main things is my newsletter list, because I have complete control of that. It can never get cut off of it. It can't be like Amazon could just one day say, we don't like the way you're doing something, and just cut my books off. But my mailing list, I've got total control of. And that's a place that you can start to connect with your audience and find different ways, not just even in book promo, but telling them things about yourself, or like while you're writing your book, what was it that inspired you to get up and write today? The scene that you're working on right now, what went into that scene? What exciting happened that kind of like lit you up for that, or where did it come from in your experience? But try to connect with the audience through your newsletter, whether you do that. Mine's weekly, but a lot of people do it bi-weekly or do it monthly, because the weekly is a lot, honestly. One of my friends recently was just saying that they're just exhausted with promo, and every author they've talked to is just exhausted trying to do promo, because again, it doesn't work for everybody. Things stop working that worked before, and we're like on this constant hunt to find the next thing that works. I'm glad you're willing to admit that you feel that shame, because I feel it a lot of times too. It's like I should be doing more. I should be doing more. I see people that are posting the same book to Facebook every single day, like 20 times a day in 20 different groups. And then I think, when I tried something like that, it really didn't make a difference. So is it really helping them, or is it just something that they do because they think they have to? So yeah, there are a lot of people like you, a lot of people like me you're not doing anything wrong. You know, you shouldn't have to do this kind of promo. But if you do, find things that you like to do, find things that will connect you to people that will like your book. Is a biography, is autobiography or biography?
Oh, yeah, it's an autobiography. You know, it's I guess I should be holding a copy. I'll go grab one in a minute, but it's it also weaves it through a lot of chapters about losing my sister years ago when she was really young from leukemia. I'd always kind of wanted to write a book about her, and then somehow I started just writing about my life, and it became, you know, threads of her throughout it. So that was kind of fulfilling, you know, to just sort of introduce her to the world and, you know, remind me and others that she existed. But yeah.
If it was about a famous person, you could find people that like that famous person. But
Sure.
it sounds like there's a grief and recovery theme within the book. And so, you know, trying to find ways that you can promote that within that community. The people that, you know, how I went through this and I'd love to share with you how I got through it. You know, and that one's a little tricky because you get into concerns about exploitation and, like, you know, here I am at the grief group, and by the way, I have a book, you know, but there's got to be some ways to kind of get in with organizations that deal with that kind of thing. Maybe they would provide it as a resource to their folks, or maybe they have a bookstore that you can get into, that kind of thing. So again, look for the things that are a natural fit for what you're doing.
So Vanessa McLaren Ray left a question in the chat.
Yeah,
Any tips for boosting your catalog outside of your book launch period? Do people show up for book events that aren't launch related?
Again, I found best success doing it with groups of people. So last night I read at the Lavender Library from Flawless, which I got over there. I didn't bring a copy over here, but it's my new from Stephen Water Dragon. It's a basically a drag queen in space book, which kind of sells itself just from that tagline. But yeah, it's something that I had put out with him about a month and a half ago, and I read. I consider reading something that's a little older than that too. I do River City periodically because, again, it's a local audience. So absolutely. But I do find that, again, it works best if you are reading in a group or working with a group, because you can then draw in not just a few people might come to see you, but all of their folks. I've sold a number of books at bookstore events to the brother of the other writer that's reading next to me, or the husband of the other writer that's reading next to me, or the, you know, the grandmother that came or whatever. So that kind of widens your audience. As far as general sales, I still haven't really cracked how to keep a book selling over time. And I think part of that is just getting enough of a catalog out there that people will find one of your books and then kind of continue through them to the other stuff. So part of that's just persistence. But yeah, I do stuff all the time for books that are older and put them out there again. So it looks like Trudy. I think we lost
Scott, hi Scott. Yes, I have a question about brand.
Yeah.
What is my brand? What you represent? And I'm sitting here going, what does that even mean?
Yeah,
I mean, it's not like I write sci-fi or fantasy. It's like I write a variety of things.
So what unites all those things for you? Is it, you know, a passion for writing? Is it a particular what do you put into every book? I mean, what would be the common denominator that would be across all of your books?
Well, so I've got 2 novels that I self-published, and they always end up being love stories. I mean, they're not like Harlequin love romance. You know, they're mainstream fiction love stories.
You've got a romance.
I've got a couple of books I wrote mainly for my family that I'm not interested in promoting. It's when I die, I know my kids are going to want to know about me. So,
Yeah,
and since they're not asking now, I figured I'd write it down so when I die, they can read it. I would say the thread of all the short stories I write, etc., they all end up being love stories, and how love transforms. Love transforms us in tragedy. Love transforms us, you know, in abuse and addiction and whatever. It's love that transforms. So that's kind of the thread that goes through.
So maybe your tagline is something like, you know, in every life, love transforms.
Oh, beautiful. Thank you. Can I quote you, Scott?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, that's kind of what it's about. So that's the tagline. The brand is a little different. The brand is
Okay.
that tagline as well, but it's also just kind of who you represent yourself as an author in general. Some people's brands are very aggressive. You know, I'm going to go out and challenge everybody out there and show them they're wrong. And some people's are much more, you know, I'm going to take you to a beautiful place. So the brand is sort of more of a, overall is more of a general kind of how you present yourself as an author, which your tagline kind of ties into. And it's hard to figure out. I mean, it's, you got to kind of get down to the core of like what you are trying to present yourself as an author.
Well, you gave us a lot of examples of taglines.
Yeah.
What would be an example of a brand?
So like my brand would be, suppose the tagline would be, I'm a gay own voices author who writes diverse fiction. And so basically it's not a pithy tagline, but it's basically describing kind of overall what I do. My core thing for my brand is diversity. And so almost all of my stories are going to include all different kinds of people. And generally it's across the LGBTQ spectrum, but I have a character with OCD. I have a character who is deaf that in one of my stories. And so I try to write, you know, characters that are all different kinds of identities. So my overall brand is that I am a writer who writes diverse stuff and is not afraid to kind of include those things with my fiction.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's,
I don't know what I am. I just kind of write. So,
and
okay.
that's okay. That's okay. Again, I think having a tagline there will kind of help you put it out there. And brand is
Yeah.
something you figure out as you go. It's often not something you're just going to like know right offhand. Some people do that. Those three people that, you know, make everything work. But yeah, brand is something you just kind of have to kind of put it together as you're going. You know, again, my friend's brand, one author was that I am someone who never makes waves, and people like me, and that was part of her brand. So for me, I think that's probably a little bit of it as well. Like I try to be friendly to everyone and I try to be helpful to everyone. So a little bit of my author brand is kind of supporting other authors. But a brand is sort of an amorphous thing, and it's by nature kind of hard to pin down and define beyond what your tagline is. You just have to kind of figure out how do you want to present yourself in the world? You know, what's the first thing you would tell people about what you do?
So is your brand, say you had a website, would your brand be there, your tagline be there, or would the brand be woven through everything that's in the website?
Yeah, your brand would be woven through, especially your author bio. Would really good
Okay.
brand. Your tagline I would put at the top on your website, put on your Facebook header, that kind of thing.
Okay.
Yeah, your brand is going to be more kind of describing who you are and where you come from as an author.
Okay. All right.
But
Got it. Thank you.
A little bit synonymous with bio, but in the sense, not the stuff in the bio that, you know, when I was 12, I did this, and I was 14, I did this, but more about this is a statement of who I am.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Can you talk a little bit about how ideas for growing your mailing list? Because mine seems to be stuck.
Yeah, okay, a couple different directions here. Recommended practice on a mailing list these days is that you only mail to people that open your stuff and or click on your links, because the other people are basically, especially in this age when you're often paying for email over a certain point, is that it's a waste of time, first of all, for you to be sending to people that never engage with your stuff, and that, you know, it may actually cost you more at some point. And also, if it's not good, if you send a mass like newsletter mailing and a whole bunch of people don't get it or look at it, that's not going to look good for like Google, or the other email providers that are receiving the emails, that they get a bunch of stuff that nobody responds to. It looks more spammy. That said, I use that standard mostly on my sites at about 3 to 6 months and cut them off if they don't do one of the two. But I also periodically do an entire mailing list, even the people that haven't responded, for when I have like a big thing, like if I've got a new release announcement. And my feeling on is that some of those people that haven't responded before, maybe they're going to respond to this one, and then they'll fall into my group of people that gets the regular emails. So that's kind of mail list management. As far as growing the list, there are a number of ways to do that. What I found most effective at this moment in time are giveaways. We do on our sites on Queer Sci Fi, QueeRomance Ink, and Liminal Fiction, which are, well, Queer Sci Fi, first of all, Queer Romance, and then the other one is sci-fi, fantasy, paranormal, and horror. We do a 4-book giveaway bundle, and then we basically have people sign up for the mailing list. We give them the option to opt out, but then everybody that signs up gets shared with the authors. So that's typically 100, 150 a month for anybody who signs up for those bundles. The other one that works for me a lot is Story Origin. I don't know if you guys are on that.
No.
So a friend of mine got me into that one 3-4 years ago. So the core of Story Origin started as newsletter swaps.
Just
Yeah.
like Substack?
Probably. Can you do like a reader magnet type thing and then share with other people?
Oh, Substack, yeah, it's like a blog with keywords so that people can go on the site and search for keywords for what they want people to blog about.
Yeah, it's not like that. This is more so basically what he does, the guy who created the site, he sets it up so that you can put in your newsletters. And so I put in like my next 16 newsletters that are coming out. I think that's as far as you can go. And I put in tags for what they are, what genres they are. And then I can put my books up on the site as reader magnets. So I can do like either a short, I can do a prequel, I can do a full book, I can do a sample, whatever I want to do.
Fan fiction? Only you're doing it yourself.
Well, no, these are actually my actual books. But
Oh,
what
okay.
I'm putting it sort of more like I think not Book Brush. There's another one that does similar to that. But I put my
I'll
book
check it out.
there, or yeah. And then what people can do, and other authors basically say, I want to do a trade with you, or I can do a trade with them. And so I go and I do a search, and I can search by genre. I can search by what their campaign is. Main ones I use are genre, and I use there's an option for whether they're wide or whether they're kind of a mix or whether they're only on Amazon. And so since I'm wide, I pick people that are also wide because they're going to have the best audience for my books. And then I look for things that are science fiction. Depending on which one, if it's our non-romance site, then I say I don't want romance or erotica. And then it gives me a list of all the upcoming newsletters for all the people that are doing them. And then I send them an invite proposing that we do a trade for mine on this date, theirs on this date, this one book for me, that book for them. And then if that date comes around, I do 4 per newsletter. And so I go into the site and I basically put all 4 books in my newsletter. And it's got a tracking code that they provide. They do the same on theirs. And then anybody who signs up for that free book goes onto my mailing list on the site, which I can then download. So in a typical month, I will get, again, probably about 100 a month new mail list ads through this. And you can change the books out at any time. You can set it up so that you have multiple books and they can choose from. You can also do just buy links if you want. So if you have a new release and you don't want to do a reader magnet, you can do a buy link and they can put that in their newsletter, but you won't get an actual email for anybody from that one. It's just basically more. But it's been about the most effective thing the last couple of years that I've done for newsletter growth.
And how do you get around the fact that that people have to opt in? I mean,
so it is, yeah, it's an opt-in on the thing itself. So they have to opt in to receiving yours by doing it.
Okay. So that's how they take care of it. Okay.
Their system. So
because I mean, I went to like the Boston Book Fair and I gave away a basket with my books and some other stuff in it, some coffee and some other stuff. And I got several hundred people who signed up for it. So they were added to my mailing list. And then after I sent out the first one, about 24, 25 of them opted out, which MailChimp didn't have a big problem with because it'd been such a huge number. And but
yeah, Poet, which is very similar. And we also at our local author group things, we have a sign up sheet for basically and the authors, and it says you'll be added to the group and the author list. And by signing this, you're consenting to. It's got all the verbiage on there on the page, and then we keep that just in. So yeah, we do the same thing. And you're always going to get on a freebie. You're going to get people that I got the freebie, I'm done, and that's fine. But you're hoping to hook a few people that are going to be more lifelong readers.
Right. I figure I still got a few hundred people from the book fair that didn't opt out. Now we'll see how many actually open the newsletter, but that's another issue.
Yeah, so that's another option. Doing if you do a local thing with your group, you can have a sign up sheet and then just make it really clear on the sign up sheet that they're signing up for the author list and for the group list. And if they want to then sign out, be removed, they can request to be removed from the list themselves. But just be clear in your verbiage on that. US is not really strong on that. We do have the Canned Spam Act.
EU is.
Your chance of being sued by somebody in the EU and it sticking are probably pretty low, but the fines can be really high. I mean, it was like $1 million per incident or something. When they wrote the GDPR law in the EU, they were trying to kind of capture the big companies, but the way that they wrote it was really injurious. Mark and I ran still run a gay and lesbian travel directory, and we had like 1,000 and some properties in Europe, but the law required that we have to have every so often consent for being on the list. So we wrote to every single one of them. We ended up losing about 800 of the properties off our directory because they didn't respond to the list, even though they were probably fine with it, but we
Mhm.
couldn't take a chance. So yeah, you want to make sure you do best practices with your mailing list. You don't want to just jam people on the list that haven't given you permission. You want to make sure you've got some kind of tracking of how you got them. So if you ever to go back and say, oh yeah, you signed up on this date through this source, and here's the proof that you did so. I have never actually been challenged on that, but it's possible. Yeah, so I'd recommend those things. I would look for giveaways that you can join. I would, a lot of people do that kind of thing that we're doing. I would check out Story Origin.
Okay.
I think they charge like $75 a year or something for it, but for me, it's been well worth it because he keeps adding things to it. There's a lot of other services now in addition to that core. He's got a thing with thing called Lemon Squeezy, which is kind of like a pay-hip sort of service, where you can actually set up through him to have your ebooks sold, and then he can set up a page that's set up for your domain. So it's like booksales.yourdomain.com. Even though it's hosted as his site, it looks like it's a native part of your site and has all of your books for sale in ebook format. So there's a lot of stuff. He's always amazed at watching him kind of keep doing all these new things and adding this stuff to the site. But it's well worth it in my opinion.
So one question I have is, so if you're getting ready for a book launch, you've got a book launch that's coming up, can you give us a sense for what your timeline of events would be to be prepared for the book launch?
Sure. So I've been trying a strategy which hasn't unfortunately worked as well as I hoped it would. I really want to get reviewed by some of the big magazines, Publishers Weekly, Library Journal, Book List, and that. And to do that, you have to have books ready, usually in print format, although some will take PDFs about 3 to 4 months before the book is actually launching. So for my last few big releases, I've done that. I basically kind of had everything ready. And then, our tendency as indie authors is like, okay, it's done. I want it out there tomorrow. I've held myself back and actually gone through the process of like submitting to all these places. And I had gotten some reviews in the past that way. This last round I did not, but if it had, I think it still would have been worth it in terms of being able to get the book into libraries and bookstores and things and just get more attention to it. I've also tried some IBPA, the Independent Book Publishers Association ads for libraries and for bookstores. And I can see that there were some results there. Most of my recent books have outsold in paperbacks through Ingram, what they sold initially through the other sources. So, it did make a difference. I don't know if I made my money back on it. But so then that's kind of out at that point. I do a blog tour, and I'm fortunate because my husband Mark does the tours for me, so I don't have to pay him. I just have to make him dinner now and then. But I do schedule the blog tour with him about 3 months out. So if you're going to do a tour, you really want to either work with your tour company, or if you're doing it yourself, contact bloggers at least 2 to 3 months beforehand to make sure you can get a spot, because they do fill up. As you get closer, you want to start pulling together anybody that can help promote the book for you. So I have a list for my series, the Thrasa series, The Dragon Eater. I have a list that I started with that one of authors who had agreed to help me. And I just simply put it on Facebook, hey, all my writer friends, anybody want to help me promote this book? And so I go back to that list and I put out another reminder out about 2 months before and just ask for folks to help me out. And I've got all the blog tour materials already, the press kit and the graphics. I do meme graphics, and I do of course, the book cover and all the other stuff that goes with it. So I just provide that to everybody who signs up for that for me. And typically, I call that my shadow tour, because it's kind of a, here's the blog tour and then here's kind of the shadow tour behind it. And the last one I did, I think I had 100 authors that participated in helping me promote the book. And it was a combination of, some of them were doing social media, some of them were putting in a newsletter, some of them were doing just other kinds of mentioning for the book for me. And I think it makes a difference. And they're all kind of rooting for you, so that kind of gives you a little bit of energy going into the final stretch. I haven't tried doing I've never tried setting up just local stuff for myself. I shouldn't say never. I did one with River City. Mostly, again, I do it through the group. So, whenever we've got a group event coming up, I make sure I'm reading my latest book at that event, and they often coincide within a short period. And then, yeah, when I get to my actual day of, then for that day and the next day, even though I'm not convinced anymore that it actually does much, I spend all day on social media and in my newsletters and things and putting the word out. So the morning of release, something goes out to everybody on our newsletters and said, you know, this book is out now, get it now. Often I do something to go with it. So for the Thoracis, the first book, I had this great idea to do these short stories, and I had 2 of them already, and I just needed to write 1 more. And I would make a little collection to give out with it, you know, or sell with the first one. And it turned out to be one of the hardest stories I ever wrote. It was dealing with racism, and I had a beta reader who was wonderful, but also really, really hard on me. And the final story, I think, was worth it. But then I did that as a giveaway. So anybody who bought the first book, I was able to say, hey, you're going to get this really cool book with all the kind of background in this world beforehand. So then, yeah, release day, I'm just out there basically putting it out everywhere I can think to put it. And then I see how it goes. And if it's doing well, I continue into the second day and do a little bit more. And then at that point, I kind of just let it go into my regular promotion stuff. You know, there's only a certain level that you can sustain over a period of time. And so I'm like running full speed for a day and a half or so. And I'm like, okay, now I've got to just put in my regular promo with everything else. So that's kind of how I build it.
The one thing you didn't mention was reviews. How do you get reviews?
Okay. Well, I didn't sending it out. So I did again when I did the Suck a Little Happy Juice book, I found all kinds of big reviewers and sent them to them, and I don't think anybody reviewed it. But we do also, as part of the tour, we have a number of folks that do reviews, and so we ask them, and often I'll get 3 or 4 reviews out of that. I've tried doing the NetGalley thing. If you want,
I haven't had a lot of luck.
Yeah. NetGalley. So NetGalley, you basically put your book up, people can get it for free for a review. There's a couple other services that work that way as well.
Reedsy.
Yeah, NetGalley. No, I tried to contact Reedsy to do book formatting and some graphic work, and they turned me down. So I'm like, I'm kind of And then, NetGalley, so the Science Fiction Writers Association, SFWA, has a NetGalley program where they buy stuff in bulk from them, and they will give it to their members. But you also don't have to be a member, and your book doesn't necessarily have to be science fiction. So they basically give first priority each month to members and to science fiction fantasy, but you can contact them and see if they have any spaces available. And I think it's like $25 or something through them.
But you can do it through the Mystery Writers of America too.
So they do the same thing. Yeah. So there's ways you can basically get into it that cost you a lot less, and you can basically get out to a number of reviewers. There was a blogging company that did reviews. They basically had a stable of reviewers that they would have review the book for you, but I don't know. Again, it felt.
Has any of this worked?
Yeah, I never met them. We talked about it because we had authors that were doing our tours. Like, can you get me reviews? Can you get me reviews? And we could try that, but then just the sheer work of managing, try to get people to review, people that would be appropriate for that book, make sure they actually get it done, make sure they get it done on time. And we're already, our tours are $125 a tour. And we're already probably doing, I think Mark does about 13 or 14 hours of work per tour for the $125. So, adding reviews onto that and then still keeping it affordable to authors and delivering on a promise. It's just, it felt a little bit review also, to me. I have on the downside, there's 2 of my best reviewers that review everything that I do and love my work. And both of them just got kicked off of Amazon for reviewing, just like had done literally thousands of reviews on Amazon, poured their hearts into really good reviewers. And Amazon didn't like something and said something went against the famous line, community standards, and won't reply to them, won't tell them what it was, took off all of the reviews from the last 10, 12 years they put up there, all the time they spent on it. So there's a part of me that feels like, yeah, reviews are important. Yeah, I want reviews. But even if I get them, and even if I get 5-star reviews, they could just be taken down tomorrow. So I think reviews to me have become less important in terms of like Amazon ranking, which I think is kind of BS anyway, but more important in terms of what I can do with them. I can use the reviews on the back cover of my book when I do the next edition, or if I get them soon enough, to sell the book. I can use reviews in my release if I get them again soon enough and make memes and do things with them. I can use reviews to help promote the books in other ways. So for me, the value of reviews is more in what I can do with them than whether they're going to boost me somewhere, because it's just also uncertain anymore. But yeah, if I figure out a great way, I'll let you know.
Thanks.
Any more questions?
I don't want to take up much more time for people, but just real quick, this is my book. It's called Naked in the River because I was raised a hippie kid, always skinny dipping, up here in Trinity County, far northern California.
Is that
And,
you?
yeah, this is me.
Good cover.
And thank you. And I just wanted to just super quick bring up the kind of interesting paradox that I sometimes I wonder if other people go through. I often feel really caught between two worlds because I'm always doing day jobs. I also am a singer-songwriter, you know, and then a writer. And so
Yep.
I always feel like I'm kind of like a split personality and it's hard to navigate. I mean, like right now, of all things, I work in a school at a juvenile hall. So it's sort of weird. I put this out when I thought I was never re-entering society. And now I know I'm proud of my book. I mean, it's, you know, there's nothing, you know, like that I'm not proud of, but it's almost like I have a hard time, you know, with the two aspects of my life, you know, one that has to be rather conventional when in actuality, I'm quite unconventional and just kind of very alternative minded. Have any of you guys like struggled with that over time in terms of like promoting yourself and realizing how worthy you are to promote yourself, even if that aspect of your life is maybe very different than your everyday? I don't know if that makes sense.
I mean, I have something I call my author persona, which I put on for like 2 or 3 hours at a time, go out and do my thing, and then I go back
Yes.
to my boring life.
Yeah, and I mean, well, there's a whole imposter syndrome that comes in here too. It's like this, you know, this feeling that because I didn't sell 1,000 copies of my book came out, I'm an imposter, and like lots of stuff feeds into that. You know, it's hard to fight that. You have to just keep telling yourself, you know, I know what I'm doing here. Whenever I'm writing a book, I get to the middle part of the book and I call it the muddy middle. And I get to this part where like, you know, at the beginning, it's like everything's wonderful and it's the honeymoon period. And I know what I'm doing and this is great and it's going well. And then I get to the middle and it's like, oh crap. And suddenly I feel like, you know, this is so derivative. This is like the last book I wrote. What I don't know what I'm doing. Where is this going? I don't know how this is going to end. Why did I ever think I could be a writer? And it took me about 3 or 4 books before I realized that that happens every book. And now it's become an old friend that I meet on the road when I'm writing. And so I see my old friend, I'm like, I know you. It's nice to see you again. Now I'm going to write on, you know. So you have to kind of make peace with it, but there's this huge struggle with when you're not a full-time author and you're having to deal with not just the work you have to get done and not having time to write and time to promote and time for everything. But you're right, it is this like you're a whole different person in your work life than you are in your writing life. And that's
I even have a different wardrobe for when I go out and promote my
yes.
books.
Well, yeah, I mean, you know this, right? I don't wear this anywhere else. Um, yeah, I did want to say about your cover. I do not get from the cover what you told me the book was about. And I think it's not that difficult to deal with. I would just add a tagline of some sort. And like a generic one would be love, life, and healing, you know, in my life or something. But basically something that indicates first that it's an autobiography that's about you. And second, that this is kind of the theme that you're dealing with, you know, and come up with something just think because the cover itself is gorgeous.
Thank you.
But you know, looking at it, like I would not be able to tell you what it was about.
What it's about. Yes. Thank you so much. That's great advice.
Yeah. Okay, any more questions?
No, I just want to say I appreciate what you just said, because this morning I just said to my husband, this new novel I'm working on, it just seems to be a series of these fun scenes, and I don't know what's tying it all together, you know. And then I finally said, well, I'll just keep writing.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
then I'll find the thread that ties it all together, and I can go back and revise all those wonderful scenes I've written. Or kill my darlings and get rid of those wonderful scenes if they're not needed, right? So
That's the
anyways,
writer's imposter syndrome. That's, you know, you just keep writing.
yeah, I appreciate that.
I wanted to say that I am always around here. I mean, if you're on Facebook, I'm always on Facebook, way too much time. But I'm on Facebook, I'm on email and whatever. If you guys do have any questions about what came up today and you want to pass them by me, if you just want to chat, whatever, reach out to me. Part of my brand is I'm accessible and I do everything. So please feel free to contact me about any stuff that you have.
Great. Thank you very much, Scott. We really appreciate having you come in and talk to us. And thanks to all of you for coming to Stradog craft workshop. This is the last craft workshop until September. We've got a whole series of new events coming next year, but we don't have any workshops during the summer, but the regular ongoing things will still happen. So I mentioned a couple of upcoming things that are going on, and then Straw Dog Writes is every Wednesday. So thanks again for coming, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks, Scott.
Thanks.
Thank
Thank you. Thank you.
Good chat. Thanks for having me, guys.
All right, I guess we're good. So
Hey.
Scott, and thank you very much. This was fantastic.
Thank you. That was fun.
Hope to see you around soon.
Yeah. So hopefully, one of these cons you'll get out and we'll be able to see you again.
Right, yeah, yeah. I'm still on the fence about LostCon. I might try and sign up for LostCon. But
Where's
that-
ReaderCon this year?
That's the one that's in LA. It's at the LAX, I think.
Have you done it before?
I signed up for it last year, but then they announced their policy and they weren't going to be masks required, and they're not going to be masks required this year either, I'm sure. But I don't think almost anything's going to be mask required, and so. But like I say, I may be able to start persuading myself to start going to those events anyway.
And where's WorldCon this year?
It's in Glasgow.
I think
Yeah.
somebody told me that the other day, and I thought I heard Alaska. I'm like, Alaska, that's interesting. No, Alaska. Okay, yeah, okay.
It's Glasgow this year, and then next year is Seattle, and then the year after that is Anaheim.
Okay.
I think.
Yeah, I went to it when it was in San Jose, but only for a couple days. But yeah, Seattle, I could do Seattle.
Yeah, yeah. No, I'm looking forward to that. So I
Yeah.
will definitely be there for Seattle next year, and then Anaheim the year after that. So
I'll have to get coffee or something.
yeah, yeah, that'd be great. All right,
Thank you for inviting me to this. Appreciate it.
you bet. Bye.